Amira didn't build noise. She built systems. When she joined the company 3 years ago, operations were chaos. Teams missed deadlines. Reports were inconsistent. Client data was scattered across endless spreadsheets that never matched. Every department blamed another. Amira didn't complain. She stayed late. She mapped workflows. She created automation triggers that connected sales to operations, operations to finance, and finance to reporting dashboards. She designed a structure so clean that problems began disappearing before management even noticed them. Profits improved. Client complaints dropped. Performance reports suddenly looked impressive. Executives praised leadership improvements. Her manager, Mr. Khalid, smiled proudly in meetings. And quietly, he started presenting her work as his strategic vision. Amira noticed, but she kept working until one morning, HR sent a calendar invite. No warning, no discussion, just a sterile conference room and a rehearsed sentence. Due to restructuring, your role has been eliminated. Her system remained. Her access was revoked. Her laptop was taken. Security escorted her out like she was the risk. 2 days later, a company-wide email announced, introducing our new proprietary operations framework, developed under the leadership of Mr. Khalid. Amira read the message at home and smiled, because what they didn't understand was this. A system isn't just software. It's logic, it's architecture, it's maintenance, and most importantly, it's knowledge. They thought firing her meant owning her creation. They believed documentation meant control, but they had overlooked one critical detail. The system didn't run on autopilot. It ran on her understanding. And without the person who truly knew how it worked, it wasn't a framework. It was a ticking clock. When Amira first walked into the company, she knew within a week that nothing truly worked the way it was supposed to. On paper, the company looked impressive, polished branding, ambitious growth targets, confident executives. But behind the scenes, operations were chaos. Sales teams tracked leads in separate spreadsheets. Client onboarding had no consistent checklist. Finance reports were manually updated and often wrong. Departments blamed each other when deadlines slipped. Meetings were full of excuses. It's a communication issue. It's IT's fault. It's operations. Amira didn't argue. She observed. Instead of complaining, she started mapping the workflow quietly. She created diagrams of how information moved or failed to move between teams. She stayed late after office hours, studying patterns in missed deadlines and client complaints. Within a month, she proposed small changes. Shared task dashboards, automated reminders for contract renewals, centralized client tracking. Her manager, Mr. Khalid, approved them casually. "Sure, try it," he said, clearly not expecting much. But when the changes reduced missed tasks by 30%, people noticed. Amira didn't stop there. She built automation scripts that connected sales data directly to finance reports. She created performance dashboards that updated in real time. She designed escalation alerts that flagged problems before they became disasters. Slowly, the office atmosphere changed. Fewer crisis meetings, more predictable outcomes, improved quarterly performance. Executives praised organizational discipline. Mr. Khalid started using phrases like, "under my operational restructuring." Amira heard it, but she focused on results. Employees began coming to her directly when something broke. "Amira, the sync isn't updating." "Amira, can you adjust the trigger?" "Amira, this workflow is genius." She became the invisible engine behind everything. Yet her name rarely appeared in formal presentations. She wasn't invited to executive strategy meetings. She wasn't credited in company announcements. Still, she worked, not for applause, but because she loved building systems that worked. What she didn't realize at the time was this: the more essential she became, the more replaceable someone else would try to make her look. Because in some offices, competence is appreciated until it threatens someone's ego. And Amira's system wasn't just improving performance. It was making her manager look brilliant. And that's when the real problem began. At first, the credit stealing was subtle. During weekly leadership meetings, Mr. Khalid would present updated dashboards and process improvements. Our operational redesign is showing strong results, he would say confidently, clicking through slides that displayed Amira's exact system architecture. The language felt familiar, because it was hers. Amira sat quietly at the back of the room, listening as executives nodded approvingly. No more reporting delays. Client satisfaction is up. Excellent leadership, Khalid. Her name was never mentioned. Not once. She told herself it didn't matter. The work spoke for itself. Results matter more than recognition. But then it escalated. One afternoon, she received an internal email from Khalid requesting complete documentation of the system framework, including automation sequences, logic triggers, and back-end configurations. For executive archive purposes, the email said. Amira hesitated. She believed in transparency. She believed in structured processes. So she organized high-level documentation, enough for operational continuity, but not every line of back-end logic she personally maintained. When she submitted it, Khalid barely acknowledged it. 2 weeks later, a company-wide town hall was held. The CEO proudly announced, "Thanks to Khalid's proprietary operations system, we've improved efficiency by 40%. A large screen behind him displayed the exact workflow structure Amira had built. Her diagrams, her architecture, her automation map, but labeled under, developed by the operations leadership team. Amira felt something shift inside her. It wasn't jealousy. It was clarity. After the meeting, a colleague whispered to her, "You built that, right?" She gave a small nod. "They didn't even mention you." She smiled faintly. "It's fine." But it wasn't. Soon, she noticed Khalid speaking more confidently in executive spaces. His LinkedIn post started highlighting his strategic operational redesign. Investors commented. Senior leaders praised his vision. Meanwhile, Amira's access to higher-level discussions was quietly reduced. She was no longer invited to planning meetings. Instead, she was asked to focus on maintenance. That's when she understood the strategy. He wasn't just taking credit. He was repositioning the narrative. If the system became officially his, then her role could easily become unnecessary, replaceable, disposable. And in corporate politics, once your value is detached from your name, you're already in danger. Amira saw it coming. She just didn't know how quickly it would happen. The calendar invite arrived at 8:17 a.m. Subject: Organizational Review Meeting, HR and Operations. No details. No agenda. Amira knew immediately something was wrong. When she walked into the small conference room, HR was already seated. Mr. Khalid sat beside them, expression neutral, almost rehearsed. The HR representative began speaking in a controlled tone. Due to strategic restructuring, your position has been identified as redundant. Redundant. The word felt surreal. Amira blinked. Redundant. Yes, HR continued smoothly. With the operational framework now fully integrated, we no longer require your role in its current capacity. Amira almost laughed. The framework was running because she maintained it weekly, because she debugged it constantly, because she adjusted triggers whenever departments changed process flows. Without her, it wasn't self-sustaining. She turned to Khalid. "You understand the back end still requires." "We've reviewed the documentation," he interrupted calmly. "The system is stable." Stable. She studied his face carefully. This wasn't budget cuts. This was elimination. HR slid a folder across the table. 2 weeks severance. Immediate termination of system access. Immediate. Within minutes, her email was disabled. Her admin credentials revoked. IT escorted her back to her desk to collect personal items. Employees watched quietly. Some avoided eye contact. Some looked confused. One colleague whispered as she packed her bag, "This doesn't make sense." It made perfect sense. The narrative had already been built. The system belonged to leadership. The architect was unnecessary. As she handed over her laptop, she asked one final question. "Who will maintain the weekly automation logic updates?" Khalid responded confidently. The team can handle it. The team. Amira knew something he didn't. The automation logic wasn't simple plug-and-play software. It required understanding, judgment, context. There were sequences she adjusted manually every Friday based on performance metrics that no one else monitored closely. But she didn't argue. She didn't threaten. She didn't warn. As she walked out of the building, sunlight hitting her face, her phone buzzed. A LinkedIn notification. She opened it, proud to announce the full integration of our proprietary operations system under the leadership of Mr. Khalid. Her system, his name. Amira smiled slightly, because what they had just done wasn't just unethical. It was careless. They believed documentation meant ownership. They forgot something critical. Understanding cannot be transferred in a PDF. And in exactly 4 weeks, they were going to learn that lesson. The first week after being fired was quiet. Too quiet. Amira didn't rush to post dramatic updates. She didn't vent online. She didn't call former colleagues to complain. Instead, she reviewed her own files calmly. Before the termination, she had structured the system carefully, legally, ethically, and professionally. Everything built inside the company infrastructure remained company property. But there was one thing they had misunderstood. The system wasn't static. It wasn't a finished product. It was a living structure. Every Friday, Amira manually reviewed data performance and adjusted automation triggers based on real-time behavior. She optimized task flows, refined escalation logic, tweaked integration thresholds when departments shifted strategy. None of that was fully automated, because true automation requires continuous intelligence, and that intelligence had always been hers. The documentation she handed over explained how things connected. It did not explain why certain decisions were made. It didn't outline the reasoning behind threshold changes. It didn't predict behavioral anomalies. And most importantly, it didn't contain her judgment. 3 weeks passed. She received no contact from the company. Then, one afternoon, her former colleague Sarah texted her. "Hey, quick question. Did you update the Q3 logic parameters before you left?" Amira stared at the message. "No," she replied. "I didn't have access after termination." There was a pause. Reports are showing inconsistencies. Finance dashboards aren't matching client logs. Amira leaned back in her chair. Not sabotage, not revenge, just natural decay. The system required maintenance cycles. Without those cycles, small inconsistencies compound. She didn't offer help. She didn't offer explanation. She simply said, "I hope they have someone reviewing the automation flow weekly." Another pause. They don't. Amira closed her eyes briefly. This was the part they never saw. They thought they had removed a person. In reality, they had removed a function, a thinking layer. Systems don't collapse instantly. They deteriorate, slowly, quietly, until someone notices. And by then, recovery is far more complicated than maintenance ever was. Amira didn't touch anything. She didn't access anything. She didn't interfere. She simply stopped being the invisible stabilizer. And that was enough. Because competence isn't loud, but its absence always is. The first real sign of trouble didn't come from executives. It came from the front lines. For weeks after Amira's termination, Sarah called her directly. Her voice sounded tense. "Are you busy?" she asked. "A little," Amira replied calmly. "Why?" "There's a problem." Amira didn't ask what kind. She already knew. "The client renewal reminders didn't trigger this week," Sarah continued. 2 major accounts almost lapsed. Finance caught it late. Amira stayed silent. "That's not all," Sarah added. "The performance dashboard is duplicating revenue entries. Khalid thinks IT misconfigured something." IT. Amira almost smiled. The system wasn't an IT platform issue. It was logic layering. The automation sequences were designed to recalibrate monthly based on real-time data trends. Without manual oversight, duplicated triggers were inevitable. "You had a weekly maintenance routine, right?" Sarah asked carefully. "Yes," Amira answered. "I reviewed threshold behavior every Friday." There was a long pause on the other end. No one's doing that. Of course they weren't. Because in the executive narrative, the system was self-sustaining, proprietary, brilliantly designed by leadership. Meanwhile, small inconsistencies were stacking up. Client onboarding timelines were misaligned. Finance reports required manual correction. Internal alerts triggered at random times. Nothing catastrophic. Not yet. But inefficiency has a cost. And inefficiency multiplies. A week later, another colleague messaged her privately. "Do you still have your workflow map saved? We can't find certain escalation logic." Amira responded professionally. "All documentation was submitted before my departure." She wasn't obligated to do more, and she knew better than to involve herself in anything beyond what was appropriate. Still, she felt something unexpected, not satisfaction. Clarity, because this wasn't sabotage. It was consequence. The system required stewardship. It required someone who understood its logic at a foundational level. Khalid, meanwhile, reassured executives in meetings. These are minor bugs, normal during scaling. Scaling. He still believed growth problems were cosmetic. He hadn't yet realized the truth. This wasn't a glitch. It was the first crack in a structure he didn't truly understand. And cracks, when ignored, don't disappear. They widen, quietly, until everyone can see them. The real breakdown didn't happen quietly. It happened live. 6 weeks after Amira's termination, the company had a high-stakes client presentation scheduled, one of their largest accounts. The board members were attending virtually. The CEO was present. Khalid was leading. The presentation relied entirely on the operations dashboard Amira had built. Live metrics, performance graphs, revenue projections. Khalid opened the system confidently. For the first few minutes, everything looked fine. Then the screen froze. A loading symbol spun endlessly. He refreshed. The dashboard loaded, but the numbers were wrong. Revenue doubled. Client retention showing 120%. Duplicate transaction entries flashing red. A murmur filled the room. The client frowned. "These figures don't match our reports." Khalid tried to recover. "It's just a syncing delay." He signaled IT. But IT didn't understand the back-end logic. They could troubleshoot servers. They couldn't interpret threshold conflicts caused by unadjusted automation triggers. The dashboard refreshed again. Now half the data was missing entirely. The client's expression hardened. "We'll need to postpone this review," they said coolly. The call ended abruptly. Silence followed. Inside the conference room, executives looked at Khalid. "What happened?" the CEO asked sharply. "Technical instability," Khalid replied, trying to maintain authority. But this wasn't instability. It was unmanaged architecture. Later that evening, internal emails flooded. Finance demanded explanation for misaligned reports. Sales teams reported missed automated follow-ups. 2 clients escalated complaints about billing inconsistencies. The system wasn't broken. It was drifting. Without weekly recalibration, automation loops were compounding errors. Conditional triggers were stacking instead of resetting. Amira watched none of it directly, but she heard about it. Sarah texted again. "It's getting worse." Amira read the message calmly. She hadn't sabotaged anything. She hadn't interfered. She simply wasn't there to stabilize it. And now the leadership narrative was cracking under pressure. Khalid had called the system proprietary genius. But genius requires maintenance. You can present structure. You can showcase dashboards. You can even take credit. But if you don't understand the architecture beneath it, you can't control what happens when it starts to fail. And this time, the failure wasn't small. It was public. And once instability becomes visible in front of clients, the confidence becomes harder to repair than code. The collapse had officially begun. The email came late at night. Subject: urgent clarification required. Amira stared at the sender's name, Mr. Khalid. For a moment, she didn't open it. She simply let the irony settle in. Weeks ago, she had been escorted out like a liability. Now, she was being contacted like a solution. She clicked. "Amira, We are experiencing certain inconsistencies within the automation logic framework. It appears there may be configuration dependencies not fully documented. We require clarification on the escalation trigger pathways and threshold recalibration cycles. Please advise at your earliest convenience. The tone was formal, controlled, but beneath it, she could sense urgency. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she closed her laptop and made tea. For the first time since her termination, Khalid wasn't speaking from a position of authority. He was asking. The next morning, another email arrived. This one shorter. Amira, we would appreciate a quick call to understand system nuances. Let me know your availability. Nuances. That word made her smile faintly. The entire system had been reduced to nuances. By afternoon, a third email arrived. This time marked high priority. This is affecting major accounts. We need assistance. Assistance. Not blame. Not accusation. Assistance. Amira leaned back in her chair and thought carefully. She owed them nothing beyond what had already been documented. Her termination agreement had been clear: immediate access removal, no transitional period requested. They chose speed over continuity. Now, they were paying for that decision. Still, she didn't feel anger. She felt confirmation, because this wasn't revenge. It was reality unfolding. She typed a short, professional reply. All system documentation was submitted prior to my departure. Any additional consulting support would require a formal contract agreement. Please route inquiries through legal. She read it twice. Clear. Boundary set. No emotion. Within minutes, Khalid responded. Let's discuss terms. Terms. 3 weeks ago, she was redundant. Now, she was essential. Amira closed her inbox calmly. She had never sabotaged the system. She had never hidden malicious code. She had simply been the mind that maintained it. And now that mind had value again. Not as an employee, but as expertise. They thought removing her meant control. What it actually meant was dependence without understanding. And that's a dangerous position for any leader to be in. The meeting with the CEO was nothing like the one with HR. No scripted tone. No rehearsed phrases. No escort waiting outside. It was direct. We made a mistake, the CEO said plainly. Amira sat across the table, composed, professional. The conference room felt different from the one she had been terminated in. This one carried tension, not authority. You built the operational architecture? He asked. Yes. And no one else fully understands the back-end logic? No. There was no arrogance in her voice. Just fact. The CEO folded his hands. We underestimated your role. That word, underestimated, had followed her career more than once. He continued. We'd like you to return. Senior title. Double your previous compensation. Full recognition as system architect. Amira listened carefully. 6 months ago, she would have fought to stay. Now, she had options. Her consulting work had expanded. 3 mid-sized companies had signed contracts with her. She was designing systems again, but this time under her own brand, her own terms. Why now? She asked calmly. Because we can't stabilize without you. Honesty. Finally. She appreciated that more than the offer. And college, she asked. The CEO hesitated. He's being reviewed. Being reviewed. Corporate language for accountability in progress. The CEO leaned forward slightly. You'd have full authority this time. Authority wasn't the issue. Respect was. I appreciate the offer, Amira said carefully. But I don't return to places that remove me without understanding my value. The CEO nodded slowly. Would you consider consulting support? There it was again. Not employment. Expertise. That depends on terms, she replied. Clear boundaries. No emotion. No resentment. Just leverage. As she walked out of the building, the same building she had once left with security, she felt something powerful. Not revenge. Not victory. Clarity. They had fired her to control the system. Now they needed her to control the damage. But this time, she wasn't a replaceable employee. She was a specialist. And specialists don't beg to return. They negotiate, because once your value is proven through absence, it becomes impossible to ignore. And Amira had no intention of shrinking herself to fit a role they once called redundant. The meeting with the CEO was nothing like the one with HR. No scripted tone, no rehearsed phrases, no escort waiting outside. It was direct. "We made a mistake," the CEO said plainly. Amira sat across the table, composed, professional. The conference room felt different from the one she had been terminated in. This one carried tension, not authority. "You built the operational architecture?" he asked. "Yes." "And no one else fully understands the back-end logic?" "No." There was no arrogance in her voice, just fact. The CEO folded his hands. "We underestimated your role." That word, underestimated, had followed her career more than once. He continued, "We'd like you to return. Senior title, double your previous compensation, full recognition as system architect." Amira listened carefully. 6 months ago, she would have fought to stay. Now, she had options. Her consulting work had expanded. 3 mid-sized companies had signed contracts with her. She was designing systems again, but this time under her own brand, her own terms. "Why now?" she asked calmly. "Because we can't stabilize without you." Honesty. Finally. She appreciated that more than the offer. "And college?" she asked. The CEO hesitated. "He's being reviewed." Being reviewed. Corporate language for accountability in progress. The CEO leaned forward slightly. "You'd have full authority this time." Authority wasn't the issue. Respect was. "I appreciate the offer," Amira said carefully. "But I don't return to places that remove me without understanding my value." The CEO nodded slowly. "Would you consider consulting support?" There it was again. "Not employment. Expertise." "That depends on terms," she replied. "Clear boundaries. No emotion. No resentment. Just leverage." As she walked out of the building, the same building she had once left with security, she felt something powerful. Not revenge. Not victory. Clarity. They had fired her to control the system. Now they needed her to control the damage. But this time, she wasn't a replaceable employee. She was a specialist. And specialists don't beg to return. They negotiate. Because once your value is proven through absence, it becomes impossible to ignore. And Amira had no intention of shrinking herself to fit a role they once called redundant. Amira didn't return as an employee. She returned as a consultant. On her terms. A formal contract was signed. High hourly rate. Clear scope of work. Limited duration. No internal politics. No reporting to Khalid. In fact, Khalid wasn't there anymore. 2 weeks after the board review, he had been quietly transitioned out. The official statement cited strategic misalignment. Everyone inside the company knew what it really meant. Accountability had finally reached the right desk. When Amira walked back into the building, it felt different. No security escort. No HR folder. Executives greeted her directly. Respectfully. She didn't smile excessively. She didn't act superior. She simply opened her laptop and began reviewing the damage. Within minutes, she identified the core issues. Unmanaged threshold stacking. Escalation triggers firing in loops. Data duplication from unmonitored integration conflicts. "Why wasn't this reviewed weekly?" she asked calmly. Silence answered her. Because no one knew it needed to be. She stabilized the system in phases. Rebuilt logic sequences. Simplified automation layers to reduce dependency on manual recalibration. Within a month, dashboards were accurate again. Client trust began restoring. Performance metrics stabilized. The CEO called another board meeting. This time, Amira presented. Not as an assistant, not as background support, but as the architect. No dramatic speeches. No emotional revenge. Just results. After the contract ended, the CEO made one final offer. Stay permanently. She declined. Because this wasn't about proving she could fix it. It was about proving she didn't need it. Her consulting firm had grown. 2 of the company's former clients had signed independent contracts with her. Word had spread across the industry, not about drama, but about expertise. As she walked out of the building one last time, she realized something important. They had fired her to steal her system. But they forgot one truth. You can replicate structure. You cannot replicate understanding. They tried to own her work. Instead, her absence exposed their weakness. And the real victory wasn't watching the system crash. It was watching them finally understand why it worked in the first place. Because competence doesn't shout, it stabilizes. And when it leaves, everything else shakes. Amira's story was never about revenge. It wasn't about watching a company burn. It wasn't about humiliating a manager who took credit. It was about something much simpler and far more powerful: value. When they fired her, they believed they were removing a role. In reality, they removed understanding. They assumed documentation meant mastery. They assumed visibility meant ownership. They assumed replacing a person was easier than respecting one. But systems don't run on slides and presentations. They run on insight, on attention to detail, on the quiet intelligence of someone who understands how every moving part connects. Amira didn't sabotage anything. She didn't insert hidden flaws. She didn't seek chaos. She simply stopped being the invisible force holding everything together. And that was enough. Because incompetence doesn't show immediately. It reveals itself under pressure. When clients questioned reports, when dashboards froze mid-presentation, when leadership had no answers, that's when the truth surfaced. You can take credit. You can take titles. You can even take someone's job. But you cannot take capability. And once absence exposes capability, the power dynamic shifts permanently. Amira didn't return to prove she was right. She returned to show what expertise looks like, on her terms. Then she left again. Stronger, independent, untouchable. The real lesson wasn't about office politics. It was about knowing your worth long before others do. Because when someone tries to erase your contribution, let them. If you truly built the foundation, they'll eventually feel the crack. And when they do, they'll remember your name.